Muy buenas tardes a todos. Good afternoon, everyone. As always, it's an honor to address the US-Cuba Democracy PAC's annual luncheon. I look forward to this event every year, so I'm truly sorry that I cannot join my many friends in Miami today who are committed to democracy and human rights in Cuba. Let me start today by thanking each and every one of you for your unwavering commitment to our shared dream of seeing freedom and democracy return to Cuba. It is your consistent advocacy and your continuous sacrifice, financial and otherwise, that will guarantee that one day soon our shared dream becomes a reality. And as I committed to you in person last year, I will not stop working until the decades-long nightmare of the Castro's reign comes to an end. You all know that I will not rest until our brothers and sisters are able to live in a democratic and prosperous Cuba. Now, over the past year, we've seen a number of interest groups want to mortgage our vision of a free Cuba for a series of short-term business deals. And in recent months, we have started to hear a familiar drumbeat from certain members of the U.S. Congress and from the editorial pages of certain newspapers calling for the United States to unilaterally end its sanctions on Cuba. I pledge to you all today that I will not stand idly by, and I will not allow unscrupulous actors to do business with and enrich the Castro regime and its military monopolies, while Cuban families are subject to depredations and a quality of life that is not only among the lowest in the hemisphere, but in the entire world. I will not bend to those who want to see Cuba become just another Caribbean destination for American tourists looking to spend time on a beach, not while the average Cuban makes $25 a month and is constantly under the surveillance of an oppressive intelligence service. To these people and these interest groups, I say the United States-Cuba policy is not a relic of the past. The Castros are as hostile towards the United States, hostile towards freedom, hostile towards human rights, and hostile towards international peace and security as much now as they have ever been. The Castro regime is responsible for more than 7,500 political arrests this year alone, a number that is unparalleled in the Americas. Also, this month marks 5 years that the Cuban government has unjustly held an American citizen, Alan Gross, hostage in deplorable conditions. And just last year, the Castro dictatorship colluded with the North Korean government to smuggle illegal arms through the Panama Canal, the single largest violation of UN sanctions ever recorded. And when Venezuelan security forces took to the streets earlier this year to violently repress peaceful protesters and jail its political opponents, the Castro's tactics were clearly present. These are not casual anecdotes that can be discarded or ignored. So, as the calls to unilaterally ease sanctions towards Cuba intensify, so must our efforts to push back. And we must also strengthen our efforts to support those courageous democracy activists and members of the opposition who are risking their lives for a better future for all Cubans. I've met with numerous Cuban democracy leaders over the last year. I've met with Berta Soler, leader of the Damas de Blanco. Berta, as we all know, is a portrait of courage, her humility, her tireless struggle, her willingness to speak out in defense of the human rights of all Cubans should serve as an inspiration to all of us. I've also met with Jorge Luis Garcia Perez Antunes, an individual who has been jailed, tortured, beaten, harassed by the Cuban government, and still takes to the streets every day and won't allow the Castros to silence him. And I've also met members of a new generation of independent voices, including Antonio Rodiles, who opens his home to all members of the Cuban opposition in an effort to reach consensus on how to best pressure the Castro regime to respect the basic rights and fundamental freedoms of its citizens. In all of my meetings with human rights activists and members of the Cuban opposition, they have overwhelmingly urged me not to allow the United States government to lift sanctions at this time, which, as you know, would ease pressure on the Castro's dictatorship and permit the Cuban government to strengthen its repressive security apparatus. Without fail, in every one of these conversations, I've given these brave men and women my word. and I do so again with all of you today. Que viva Cuba Libre.